Ever since I was a little kid, I've always been a huge fan of science fiction, film, books, whatever. I'm a huge sci-fi nut, still am, and it probably will be till I'm dead. And I'm a fan of science fiction from all um, periods of film. But really, the decade that really started the science fiction movie would be undoubtedly the 1950s, which we saw some of the many science fiction classics. We saw a lot of crap. There was definitely a lot of sci-fi crap in the 50s. But there was some great movies, and it's probably, if I can associate with a genre for any decade, I'd definitely be the 50s in science fiction. Aside from being one of the greatest decades in film, anyways, also one of the best um, decades for science fiction, anyway. But yeah, so I figured I'd like to make a top 10, just telling you guys my favorite science fiction films. Not my favorite science fiction film, although my favorite science fiction film is on here, but my favorite science fiction films from the 50s. So, let's get started. Number 10, War of the Worlds, 1953. This is often it's based on H.G. Wells' classic, which was the first to really talk about what would happen if we were invaded by aliens. Today it's overdone up the ass. Yeah, just look at Battle LA. No. Oh, God. That was weird. Okay. But this is placed a lot higher, especially on lists of the 50s science fiction movies. I'm not incredibly impressed with War of the Worlds. The things I'm not a fan of, the story, while probably much more original in the 50s, is basically just aliens come to take us over. And I can't really deal with that. I mean, I'd like a little bit more. I can totally deal with it. I don't know what I was saying right there, but I like a little more plot. The acting is wooden, kind of, and yeah, you could hear Adventure Time in the background, but yeah, but the real reason this is on here is for pioneering the flying saucer attacking genre. It's basically a genre now. It's an entertaining film, and the special effects, which were Oscar winning, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. Are just freaking phenomenal. And these aren't your cliched flying saucers. These are definitely really original and great special effects. So, yeah, not my favorite. I don't see why some people love it as much as I do, but it's still great. Number 9 is... I got it written down. Sorry, I can't do it from memory. Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Invasion of the Body Snatchers is a classic film, and I was surprised to learn on the AFI 100 list things. I think it was somewhere on the science fiction yeah. So that was really cool. I didn't know it was that, but it's definitely an original story. It's kind of a pre-runner to the 80s thing, as in it takes people over. Basically, it's just a whole bunch of aliens come down in little pods, and when they come in contact with human, they become the human, and the human dies. It's not exactly clear in the movie, but what makes it work is the great point of view of the doctor, who thinks it's just mass hysteria at first, but quickly realizes it is something more. And there's barely any special effects in this movie, but the feeling of paranoia, and obviously most of these movies were used to really symbolize the Cold War, which is hard to kind of sometimes put your mind into it, because you didn't. I wasn't born in the 50s, but it's sometimes hard to put your brain in the right spot. But it still holds up, and I definitely recommend it. So, Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Number 8. 20 Million Miles to Earth. Now, you guys should know that I'm a huge sucker for Ray Harryhausen. Messed up on his first name, usually it'd be the last name. Anyways, and say what you will about his 50s science fiction movies. Of course, we know he did plenty of classics in fantasy, mostly. Sounds Way to Sinbad. I'm planning on doing a whole really Harryhausen month, and this is definitely going to be on it. But definitely his best science fiction movie from the 50s would be keep forgetting 20 Million Miles to Earth. And basically, it's just scientists return from a trip to Venus, and they have discovered a life form which quickly hatches into an alien, which basically just gets away and grows like doubles in size every day due to like an element of carbon, the element carbon on Earth, which is really cool. Yeah, I mean it's not too original, but it's definitely the best out of Ray's 50 sci-fi work. And the animation, I don't even have to mention it because it's freaking Ray Harryhausen. It's got to be good. But the characters are good. The sets are nice. It's in Italy, and I believe it's... Wait, I don't know if it's Italy. It's in Europe, okay? But I know apparently Ray chose that spot because he wanted to go to Europe, and that'd be really cool. Just to say, hey, I want to go to Europe, and so I'll write my movie around it. Anyways, yeah, so 20 Million Miles from Earth. And the real reason that this movie works is because the Amir character, Y-M-I-R, I don't know, is actually, it's much like Kong, and it's certainly not a character as good as Kong. Ray never topped Kong. I mean, no disrespect, but you can't top Kong. Anyways, but you definitely feel for him, and very reminiscent when he shot off the Coliseum or whatever. Obviously, Harryhausen's a huge fan of Kong, me included. Me also. I don't know. It's really late, so I think I'm talking really fast, so bear with me. But 20 Million Miles to Earth, definitely check that out. Number 7, Creature from the Black Lagoon. Now, I'm a huge fan of the Universal monsters through the 30s and 40s, but then this is really the only one from the 50s, which is really put in with the Wolfman, Dracula, Frankenstein, and the Mummy, because he's so awesome. That'd be Gillman, or Creature from the Black Lagoon. Basically, scientists discover a fossil of a half man, half fish, so they go to the Amazon River, I think, to see if they can find more fossils, but they find the real thing. It's still living, and it's ready to kick some scientist ass, basically. So, it's a great movie. I love the creature design. It's one of my favorite. And it's tied for the Wolfman for my favorite. Yeah, tied for the Wolfman with my favorite Universal monster movie. And one of the greatest classic horror movies and science fiction. This is really more sci-fi. It's not really sci-fi, but I thought I'd pair it with it because I was looking at Wikipedia, the list of science fiction movies, just to see some extra ones. And this was on there, so I love Creature from the Black Lagoon. It took me forever to see it, but I finally saw it, and I love it. Number 6, The Fly. And I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the remake with Jeff Goldblum from the 80s. I'm not exactly sure when it came out. And if you've heard of The Fly, you probably dismissed it as a cheesy B movie. But no, that would be the sequel, Return of the Fly. The Fly is really a really classy and very thinking man's scientist gone array movie, basically. Has been surprised, which means you should watch it anyways because he kicks ass. But basically, a scientist, Andre Delambre, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, has basically created a teleportation unit, which is now everywhere. But this is really the first one to think of it. You know, atoms are shot up in the air and then go through the other side. Yeah, and he has many successful tests, so he decides to test it on himself. Unfortunately, he wasn't careful enough to check to see if he was the only thing in there, and it turns out a fly got in there, which means his head and arm, or hand, just his hand, has been turned into a fly. Yeah, head and arm. So the only way he can change back to human form is if they catch the fly that was in the chamber. And I won't give away what happens, but it's really suspenseful. And actually, my family watched it with me, which is really rare because my family never watches old movies with me, let alone a cheesy B movie. So it just shows. And my sister was actually really getting involved, which is rare because she won't watch anything before 1995. I don't know. But yeah, The Fly, the remake is good, but I still gotta go with the original. And if you haven't seen it, really check it out.